Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us. We are seeing some people log on now, so excited. We are going to run through a really important topic quickly today. We have 30 minutes with all of you, overcoming labor shortages in 2022. We have experts, Mike and Philip, on the phone with us. They have over 30 years of experience combined. So the stories that these two tell together, the passion between them, I learn something new every time I listen to them. So I'm really excited to share that with all of you guys today. My name is Kelly. I'll be in and out of the conversation. If you have any questions at all, go ahead and put those in the chat box or the live Q&A. And whenever I can, I'll interject with Philip and Mike and ask those questions live so they can give you some answers. Lastly, at the end of the webinar, we'll have a survey. This is going to allow us to keep doing these really awesome sessions with our team and other experts. So let us know what you want to hear. It also gives you a chance to request any information about Source Day if you want to. So with that, I'm going to go ahead, get right into it because we only have 30 minutes. Mike, Philip, go ahead and take it away.
Yeah,
thanks.
So I'll kick things off. So it was interesting. A couple months ago, I came across an article, and I think everyone's felt supply chain, and I think in two different ways. I think what brought supply chain back to the forefront of everyone's mind was just the logistics errors that we had of getting materials in and how do we manage those materials. But the one thing that me and Mike always talked about is I feel like what this is really going to hit hard with is going to be more or less the people. So from a business perspective, parts are one thing, but our people are even more important. And what this article did is it validated kind of my thoughts and the concerns, which is how is supply chain going to sustain this from a personnel standpoint? And what you can tell is it has increased vacancies significantly since supply chain has had issues. So what we really wanted to do is just talk about what we've had in the past, like what companies kind of did before, and then ultimately what a company is going to have to do to get through this and sustain moving forward. So I just wanted to start here. I mean, Mike, I know you work with a lot of companies. You've been in supply chain yourself and in manufacturing for over 20 years. I mean, are you able to validate this too? I mean, are you hearing this from businesses that they're having a hard time with employment?
Yeah, Philip, I mean, I'm on calls, probably 5 to 6 times a day with all levels of a business, whether that's down to a buyer level, being a procurement professional, all the way up to a C level. We're talking about labor shortages, not just on the manufacturing floor. That's one aspect of it, but it's really on the supply chain side. They're having problems, obviously with material, availability, but they also have problems with overstaffing, not overstaffing, but working their existing buyers, right? So we're seeing people are just changing jobs because it's the stress of that, right? They're being asked to do more with less, right? And because labor shortages and they don't have anything to fill the gap. So yeah, we're hearing this daily. I mean, it's on every conversation. I was actually at a conference last week and this came up on multiple discussions on what they need to do to fill the gap with the labor shortages.
Yeah, I had a conversation with a few companies just the last couple of weeks, and they were telling me, and one of the bullet points, the last bullet point that stuck out that made me think of this was that they've had high turnover in their procurement department. And I asked them, I was like, well, what's going on? Like, what would cause them not to? Because before, I think manufacturing kind of consistently, for the most part, years past when we were in manufacturing and worked together, Mike, long-term employees were pretty consistent. I mean, it was not uncommon that you had 5, 10, 15-year employees that were with the business for a long time. So it was shocking that I heard that they had such high turnover, that they'd have people come in and stay for maybe 6 months to 12 months and they would be gone. They would go somewhere else, either completely falling out of supply chain because it was just too stressful and they couldn't do it anymore, or since the labor market is reduced, they were able to jump and go somewhere else, whether it was for more money. So, it's like, what a company is going to do to retain employees, and how do you invest in those employees, right? To let them know that you care when it comes to supply chain.
Yeah. And what's causing that, right? So what's causing this to happen is what we need to dive into, right? So this is exactly when I talk to buyers, the procurement professionals. I call them buyers, but to me, they're professional procurement folks, and they literally tell me, and sometimes they get pretty upset. I mean, they are being asked to do more with less. There's a lot of things being thrown at them at one time, right? At all times during the day. So think about a procurement professional day in and day out what they're doing. First of all, they're chasing down suppliers, right? They're chasing down late purchase orders. Not only that, they're the sounding board of information internally to everyone in the organization when it comes to manufacturers, even distributors, right? So they are doing a lot. It's kind of funny, top right-hand corner, you see the sticky pads. I remember our days in manufacturing, the buyers would come running in and they had sticky pads all over the place, right? They had their laptops, they had their computer, their spreadsheets, and they were literally just a sounding board of information the whole time. So now compound that with everything going on with COVID, it's just 10x of what they got to do now, right? So that's why we're seeing the fallout of that. And you mentioned people jumping for another $10,000, $20,000 a year. Yes, because they feel like this is an opportunity for them to advance in their payment, in their pay every year, right? So we are seeing a lot of this happening, but what do you do to fix that, right? That's where we got to talk about today is where do we got to go and what is out there for them. So Philip, I know that you found this as well. This is interesting data, guys. This is nothing that we found. These are information that we're gathering to have calls like this.
Yeah, and speaking to the last slide too, I was famous for, so I was over operations at the manufacturing company me and Mike worked at. And I was one of the people that buyers probably despised, right? Professionals, I would be the one that ran in their office while they looked like this. And I was like, hey, I know you're busy, but I got something that's really important. I need you to completely change everything you're doing and go focus on this for a little bit, right? So they're already, working 2 laptops, or they're on their 5th cup of coffee and it's 10 a.m. and I'm in here completely disrupting everything just because I didn't know what was going on. When ideally, I could have probably checked the ERP and figured out what was happening. But to me, it felt easier if I just went to the supply chain professional because I just assumed they knew more than my ERP did. So it was funny. And then on the article that I found too, is I think why everyone's so busy. And we had a famous line that was, you can't track what you don't measure. We would say that across our entire company. Hey, you can't track what you don't measure. You can't track what you don't measure, which is true, right? You can't. But what we found out is we just started overbearing all the time of our people, just trying to track things, but gave them no time to measure it. So it was like, okay, great. So now what we found in this article is 60 to 70% of employees' times is running analytics. So you're only giving them maybe 30 to 40% of the time to do what they were already supposed to be doing, but then they're supposed to go take this analytics and make things better. So it's like, well, how would that ever be possible? Which is why they feel like they're always underwater. And I know, Mike, you ran a lot of analytics too. But I almost felt like this was so true. I even felt like the last few years that I was in manufacturing, I spent more time in spreadsheets and trying to make charts than I was actually executing anything that I needed to get done.
Now you nailed it, Philip. And that's exactly, this article kind of just brings it all to surface, right? I mean, it's a true fact. And you can talk to any professional, whether that's even on the manufacturing floor, like what your role was, or in a supply chain role. There's a lot of data out there. But if you don't use that data, what is it good for? No, yeah. I mean, you've got to execute, you have to implement these processes, and you got to get to the point where, you become more efficient. Because as we know, in every area of the business, the more efficient you are, the bigger the impact is on your bottom line, right? So that's what we're talking about here is you got to use data. You can't, like you said, you can't measure, you can't manage what you don't measure, right? So no, great point. I love this article. I love sharing this article a lot because it does nail it.
Yeah, which will be a big talking point as we continue, which is going to be like, well, what do we do? And this is really going to be when it comes to automation. And Mike, I know you've had a lot of front-end experience with a lot of these different applications that companies use right now.
All right.
I think a big piece is missing, and I think you can call it out of like why that is, or
Yeah, this slide again resonates with me again 20 plus years in manufacturing, mostly on the sell side of things, right? Because I brought a lot of the business to the manufacturing plants that I worked at for 20 plus years, but I literally had tools like CPQ. I had a CRM tool, right? And then I'd work with the procurement team. I'd work with the floor because I mean, literally they have their warehouse management systems. They are running MRP or APS, right? So I'm very familiar with these, but the funniest thing is, from the sell side of things, which is the tip of the spear, to the very back end, right, where you're doing production, we forgot procurement. You're automating the front end, you're automating the back end, you're doing lean manufacturing processes, Kaizen events to reduce cost in those areas. Why didn't we lean out procurement? Why did we not automate procurement? Because if you don't have material, I love that picture, because if you don't have material, you're not going to have material on the shelf, but you're going to have a warehouse management system. So I'm get passionate about it because, again, over 20 years sitting around procurement people, they don't get the tools that the others do at the front and then the back end of the process. So that's kind of dear to my heart, because we know that they are probably one of the most important stakeholders in the business is the procurement professionals, but we're not investing into them. And that's why you're seeing the fallout that we're having within the supply chain area. So that's, again, where we need to start pivoting and start talking about how do we invest into the procurement professionals, because they are, to me, a tip of the spear, right? And they're the ones that are driving this business, and they have the relationships with those key stakeholders called suppliers.
Which makes me think of another thing.
Oh, did we lose Philip?
Yeah, I think he froze.
He froze, but that's okay. We'll just keep going here until he logs back in. So Kelly, why don't we go ahead? Philip, we lost you there for a second.
Oh, I think I'm back now. Sorry about that.
It's okay.
Yeah, I was just saying that one of the lines that we had was, we can make time, we can't make material, which was so true, right? It was like, hey, we can run overtime, we can do double shifts, we can do all kinds of different things to accommodate things not being around. But if the material's not there, everyone stops, right? The entire business is dead in the water, which is surprising, right? I mean, I guess businesses just always assumed that the material would just show up, right? Like that's got to be the easy part, right? We're just spending money. Someone's going to give us what we buy,
right?
Until you walk into those people's offices, referring back to the other slide, and they all look like their hair is sticking off their head and they got Post-it notes everywhere. And I would be like, man, like, how do y'all live like this every single day?
It's called coffee.
Yeah. And I think moving forward is what's made it even exponentially worse is the amount of changes supply chains dealing with now opposed to what they had previously. I think before COVID, there was somewhere around 30%. And I think, Kelly, there's a slide. If you shift one slide over, here we go. So this is causing the major pain as it sits, right? I mean, there was always change. I always said there was always change in manufacturing. That's not new. Now the amount of change has risen over 20%, which that is new. And that's been standard moving forward. I don't think that's going to change at all. I think 50% is about where we are. But what has changed between these two numbers, other than the amount of hurdles that we have to take, is the employment. Me and Mike were talking about this a couple of weeks ago, and I said, man, you remember in manufacturing when we would have like a high side? We were always peaks and valleys in manufacturers we worked with. And our high sides, we just go get a bunch of temps. They would come in. It was fairly inexpensive, and they would get us to a point, and then we could get rid of all of those employees and stabilize. Well, the market's not that market anymore, right? I always say you can't hide behind cheap labor. Labor is way more expensive than it ever was, which means we have to utilize that labor to its fullest extent, or else it's going to end up costing the overhead of the business significantly.
Right.
So I don't know, Mike. I mean, is that also, does that feel like what you're seeing?
Yeah, no, you just nailed it, right? Again, it all comes back to the changing in the purchase order side is one thing, right? We're seeing, COVID only expedited this and said, okay, 20-30% is the norm, but now 52% is the norm. More importantly, each line on that purchase order changes roughly 2.5 times so now think about a buyer having to do that, right? So you're right. The peaks and valleys, we don't have that luxury just to throw people at the problem anymore. They're not there. And if they are, you're going through interviewing maybe 5 to 10 people for one to stick, and then it's going to take them 6 months to ramp. So what's happening is that turnover is causing a ripple effect right down to literally getting material on the floor to be able to produce and hit customer expectation and revenue targets, right? So it's a ripple effect that people I don't think are paying attention to. And how do we overcome that? As I mentioned earlier, we invest in automation at the front end and the back end. Let's invest into the people like procurement professionals and automate some of their processes to free them up, right? Yeah. We're having these talks, Philip, you and I talk to people every day, 3 to 4 times a day about this. And now companies are finally realizing that, yes, we got to maintain, we've got to be able to automate processes within procurement, right? Because if not, we're going to try to find somebody to fill that gap, and they're just not there. And if they are, they're 2x of maybe what they were last time, right? So it's adding overhead to the business. Not saying I don't want you to hire. I'm just saying you got to be strategic, and it's harder to find that one, because they're only out there, a handful of them out there that you can go, and everyone's going for, right?
Or how do you give your company the competitive edge, right? Like I said, if the market's down and everyone's hiring, how do you put yourself above some other company that's hiring for the same position to get a competitive edge, to get that high rate A employee, right? And that's what we're all looking for, is A employees. And to your point, it may take 3 or 4 to find that A, but if you can't get 3 or 4 in to evaluate that way, you need some competitive edge to put you above someone else. As a business. So
well, go ahead, Kelly. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to add to that. Even on the other side, I was talking to a supplier on Monday, and he told me, consistently, he's in manufacturing. I got a PO today with 52 lines, and he has to manually update all of those lines because color changes, or the color was wrong on the PO. Or it wasn't indicated. So how many emails are back and forth? And you could just see it on his face, him being overwhelmed and just kind of mad, just like, got another really large one. I have to send it to production. Can't do that until I get all of the details, the images, all the spec sheets. So I think for the buyers, yes, we need to support them, but it's also pressure
the suppliers.
So
the suppliers are in the same boat, and they're feeling the pains, because again, they're again on high demand right now, right? Suppliers are trying to fulfill demand for not just one customer, filling demand for hundreds of customers, right? So they're in that world as well. So what do we do? So let's talk about that. We got about 10 minutes left. So what do we do to help procurement professionals, even the suppliers, right? And this is one thing that really has struck me, and that is literally, you got your ERP, right? That's running your business. It is your crystal ball. It's doing your demand planning. It's doing your manufacturing operations, financial tools. You spent a lot of money on this platform, right? Regardless of what it is, SAP down to, a NetSuite or any type of ERP out there. But you're managing one of your most important stakeholders in your business, literally in this big black hole, right? And you're managing them through spreadsheets and emails. That's very risky to your business, right? So what do? You look at automation. There's tools out there, folks. There's tools out there that can help you bridge that gap, bring those suppliers into your business real time to reduce that risk, increase the visibility, increase accountability, right? But more importantly, automate. And that is, again, you want to get to the point where your buyers are getting away from being that, that tactical, non-value added. I wouldn't say non-value added as much as just a tactical, reactive buyer. And you give them a tool, invest in your employees, right? Give them a tool to pivot, so they flip to become a proactive strategic buyer. And that's more value add to your business, right? And reduces risk.
Analytical stuff, right? It's
the analytics.
How do you give them time to do the measurement side of all these analytics they've put together? Well, it's got to be with some type of automation, right? We've got to automate, to your point, all this tactical stuff that they're doing on a daily basis. These 200 emails they send every day, all day they need to be sent, is not improving anything, right? It's reacting to something that already exists as an issue. Another thing I thought was cool about the automation and why automation's important is, companies invest in these planning systems, whether it's MRP or an APS or whatever kind of planning system you're running, but you're only planning on what you know right now. So when we say your purchasing agent sent 200 emails today, maybe requesting things from a supplier, well, how long is it going to take to get that data or answers back? Well, if it takes a week and a half, you've been planning wrong for a week and a half, period.
Right.
So by the time you do realize what's going to happen, it's already all upside down, right? You may have manufacturing lines set up that are stalled, that now have to be torn down and reset because this part's not going to make it. And then to the suppliers, I always talk about, like, what's this do for the purchasing agent? And to Kelly's point, like, this also does a lot for the supplier. I mean, if you think about it, your POs are their revenue stream. So the smoother they can plan their revenue and know what's going on with their revenue, trust me, they're happy suppliers. And me and Mike were on the revenue side of these things, right? We were a supplier to major customers, and we were laughing about it just earlier that, man, if I had a way to go in and click a button and get new orders to my business, I'd be like, sign me up. That's the easiest business I've ever had. I'm all over it. I was like, whatever you can do to make my life easy, I'm down.
Exactly.
So I thought it was great to not just automate POs, but think about what you're automating to your supply chain as a partner, which is their revenue and their payments. I mean, they're going to want things to be just as smooth as you do. And it only makes it better for them if they keep you real time updated, because then when they bill you, they know that bill is going to get paid, opposed to maybe of missing something along the way. And now it's been stopped for payment because of a discrepancy.
Right. Kelly, we'll go to the next slide real quick.
Yeah, and I just want to add to also just talking to some of our customers, and you guys have mentioned this so many times just from your experience. I think it's really important is, you touched on it earlier, the time that people spend and they don't feel appreciated, they're overworked, and just having a way to get time back to actually do the work that the data is showing and improve the process, and then have time to not be stressing about work when they go home. And I think that, I know all of us really are passionate about that, but is probably the biggest thing. That's how you're going to retain your employees, because they're happy, they're not overworked, and you're giving them a tool that they can really succeed with. Yeah.
No, you just nailed it. And I think you just summarized this slide. So thank you for doing that. But, again, what we want to show for the audience is, again, automation, there's tools out there, right? And you just got to, obviously do your research, but, there is tools out there to help your employees. And I'm just going to be adamant, just please consider that, because employees are more valuable today than they ever have been. So, consider doing some automation, investing into those employees to get that overall, not only front and back end, but the entire organization to become more efficient, right? And less stress. Get them to be, having time back every day, every week, like Kelly said, so they're not taking their work at home. Unfortunately, that's still the nature of the beast. But, it is important to look long term. And I'm not talking, we don't know when COVID's going to end. We don't know when this disruption is going to end. It could be another one next week or the week after that. We never know, right? So, look at automating to help your employees out. Now, I'm not, Kelly, I'm not sure how many slides we have left.
No, and I think there's one slide after this, but I'll end with Mike too before we get into the very end, which is so true. So if you take anything away from what we're talking about today, it's to Mike's point, to Kelly's point, think about the employee. We have a big saying around our company that's just, change lives. Like, how can we take something and make it better from a personal perspective, not just business? Yes, business is important, but I think the people are what make a business. And these people are the highest stressed within any organization. And all we're saying, and I think what I would like to say is, do not let "this is how we've always done it" or status quo keep you from investing in people. There are tools, to Mike's point, regardless of what that tool is or what best fits your needs. We highly recommend you at least do the research and let them be involved. That's another thing I will hugely say as an organization: involve your people. Don't go find a tool for them. Let them find a tool for themselves. And I think that completely changes the outcome that I've seen personally, where I've seen companies come in and force a tool down. It never works. There was never buy-in from the beginning. They had no say-so in it. So as you investigate, which I highly promote you do, I would say involve your people. Let them be the decision makers on what they want to use moving forward.
You nailed it.
100%. I think the most successful customers that we see are those who are really communicating with their workforce, for sure.
Exactly.
Wow. Okay. Like I said, I always learn something new. I know you guys have a ton of stories to tell, and I feel like we should start sending those out to everyone. So maybe we'll start doing that. Anyone on here, let us know if that's something you'd be interested in. If you have any questions that you didn't get to ask while we were online today, go ahead and just scan this code. It's going to take you to a survey that will let you type in that question. and Philip, Mike, and myself will reach out personally and get that answered for you. Just a reminder that short survey, I think it's 4 questions. It's just going to allow us to keep producing topics that are important to you. So please let us know what you want to hear. And if you have any other questions, you can also put it in there. As promised, if you've attended this, lunch is on us. So you will be getting an email from us at Uber Eats. It's my favorite kind of gift that I get. So give us today and tomorrow, and you should see that. And if you don't, please feel free to email me. You should have it from the invite. So thank you so much for joining us. Mike, Philip, as always, thank you. You guys are awesome. And we will see you guys next time. Bye.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.